Welcome to MCN and welcome to a test that we are really excited about. In a world where everything's getting more expensive and wages ain't really going up that much, every pound matters, and that's why we were really impressed when Cove released the price on their 800X. So that is a proper middleweight adventure bike for under 8.5 grand. Now, we had it out for a first ride and our adventure guru, Michael Guy, had an absolute blast on it and was really impressed with it, especially considering the price point. But we wanted to put it against two of its closest rivals. So what we've got is we've got two of the more road-biased adventure bikes on the market. We've got Yamaha's new Ténéré 700 Explore, and we've also got KTM's 790 Adventure. I can already see some more comments coming down below asking where the Aprilia Touareg is. And all I can say is apologies. We tried our very best to get it in this test because, to be honest, I think it would have done really well. I think it probably might have had a chance of being up the top. But the way the timing's worked, Aprilia just couldn't make it happen. So that is a test that we're going to have to do in the future. You also might be wondering why we haven't included the V-Strom or the Transalp in this test. And that was because we did a Ténéré V-Strom Transalp test last year, and the Ténéré came out on top. So we thought we might as well just take the winner from that test and keep it a little bit simpler for this one. So thankfully, making our life a bit easier, they come on the same OE tyres, so all of them are on Pirelli Scorpion Rally STRs. And what we've done is we've imagined what the sort of buyer of these bikes would do with them. So we've done mainly road riding, probably about 80% road riding, and we've also done 20% off of it, because if you're going to buy an adventure bike, you sort of want to know how it feels on the dirt. We haven't done anything too crazy, just quite a few nice green lanes and stuff like that. We've done motorway mileage, B roads, pretty much everything you can chuck their way. But before we get into how they ride, let's get into the stats, because we've weighed them all and we've stuck them all on the dyno so you can see the true figures of each machine. So we'll start with the most expensive of the bunch, KTM 790 Adventure, because it's also the most powerful and the heaviest on test. So it's 85.5 brake horsepower and 61.4 foot-pound of torque, and it weighs in at 215.4 kilos. So not only is it the heaviest, but it's also the most powerful and it makes the most torque, but it does make that torque fairly low down. At the bottom of the pile, you've got Yamaha's Ténéré 700 Explore. So that makes 64.4 brake horsepower, 44 foot-pound of torque, and weighs in at 212.2 kilograms. So it's just a little bit less than the KTM in terms of the weight, but it's got quite a significant amount less in terms of its power and its torque. And then you've got the Cove 800X, the cheapest of the bunch by over 2 grand. So it's much, much cheaper, and it's also much, much lighter. It comes in well under 200 kilos at 195.4. That's a really impressive figure, especially when you consider the fact that it makes 81 brake horsepower and 49.3 foot-pound of torque. Now, you may be wondering why the Cove and the KTM have such a disparity, considering the Cove's engine is pretty much a copy of the KTM's, and that's because it'll be a copy of a slightly earlier motor, and the 790 Adventure is a bit more refined and it's seen some updates since it's been re-released and rebuilt by CF Moto. Now we're going to get on to what they're like to ride, and we're going to start with Yamaha's Ténéré 700 Explore. We went for the Explore model. You might be wondering what that means. Well, there are about 150,000 different Ténérés on sale now. This is essentially the most road biased one. The suspension has a little bit less travel. It's set up a little differently. That also means it's got a lower seat height. It comes with a quick shifter as standard, and it also comes with a bigger screen too. All these changes make a huge difference to the Ténéré. Like, it's a really nice, fun and engaging road bike anyway, but the standard model's let down by just that pitching of suspension. It's really soft, it's really tall, can be a little bit hard work if you're smaller. This just makes it that little bit more manageable, and because the suspension's really been bulked up a bit in terms of its settings, it actually holds the road far nicer as well. It's much more pleasant to corner with, and it feels so much more stable on motorways as well. It's just a really nice, pleasurable thing to ride. And that screen makes a huge difference. Before, you did get quite a bit of buffeting from the small Ténéré screen. That one gives you an extra 50% of surface coverage, and I found it's actually really nice, even with a Pete motocross style helmet. Although we talked about facts and figures and dynos and all that sort of stuff at the start of the video, the engine isn't underwhelming. That CP2 motor really has stood the test of time, considering it's now, well, it's pretty much getting on for 10, 11 years. The Ténéré's been largely unchanged for the last 5 or 6 years, and it still feels fruity and exciting. Like, you don't really feel like you're ever wanting that much more. It's only when you're sitting at motorway speeds in 6th gear and you want to overtake, and it just takes that little bit more grunt and bits like that. That's where you miss it. Another thing that you miss on the Yamaha as well is just that little bit of tech. It's still got old school wired throttle, and because of that, that means you don't get cruise control. It's not even an option, and although the quick shifter comes as standard, it doesn't include a blipper as well. It's just on the way up. Just that little bit of grunt and that little bit of tech is where the Yamaha sort of misses out slightly, especially considering it's got a reasonably premium price tag of £10,806. That's where the KTM really came into its own, because this costs £10,499 as standard, but this model that we tested, or if you go out and buy one, will cost you just over £11,200 because you have to put the tech pack on it, which unlocks the software settings for the up and down quick shifter, the cruise control, and a few other bits and bobs like that. So you have to buy the bike and then buy the software to go on it, because it unlocks after 1,500 miles. But because of that, it's the most advanced of the bunch electronically. So you get cornering ABS, you get a ride-by-wire throttle, you get engine modes that actually make a big difference when you go from rain to off-road. The traction control's really nice on it. It is a really nice bit of kit where software is concerned. But that barely even tells the story of the KTM. As we mentioned earlier, this is the heaviest of the bunch. Yet, thanks to the utter wizardry of KTM's designers and all of their development team, and how the tank is underslung and wraps around the engine, the weight is held so low. And the seat height at 860mm isn't obtrusively high if you're on the shorter side as well. So in terms of doing U-turns, in terms of, you know, just moving around at slow speeds, navigating traffic and stuff, the KTM is the most manageable of the bunch, even though the weight is the highest. On the open road, the way that WP suspension is set up is incredible. Although this model doesn't come with adjustability on the front forks, they really do handle themselves well. And it almost feels a little bit Duke-esque in the way that it can rail into corners, the way the front end just sort of finds its way through a corner. It's just such a pleasurable thing to ride. It sort of negates the fact that you've got a big front wheel, because it just feels like a proper road bike, and it always feels planted and stable. And it just is a real pleasure to ride. The motor feels really refined, and the whole package just works really well. Whether you want to ride it on the motorways, it's not too buzzy, you get great wind protection, the seat's the comfiest of the bunch. And overall, although it's the most expensive, it does feel like a premium bit of kit. But then when you've got all the stuff, when you've got all the software added onto this, it is almost £3 more than the Cove 800X. We've sort of lined these three up just so you can see them all side by side. They're all styled a bit differently. They all bring something different to the party. But the Cove looks eerily similar to the Ténéré 700 from afar. And when you're looking at almost 11 grand for the Ténéré, and when you're looking at over 11 for the KTM with all the software, and then you're looking at 8.5 grand for this, it almost feels difficult to justify. And to be honest, the Cove really impressed me for a number of reasons. We're going to start with the handling. The suspension feels really good and really plush, both on the road and off it. Its setup is really nice. It never feels like it's wanting too much more support. It never feels like it should be damped differently. It feels like they've actually put the time and effort into developing it across multiple different types of road, not just slick, nice, pleasant tarmac, but it handles bumps reasonably well. And although I'd probably make a few changes to it if it was my own and I spent some more time in the saddle, it does actually feel like a reasonably well set up bit of kit. On top of that, it's quite a spacious cockpit. The bars are high and wide. There's a reasonable amount of room from the seat to the pegs to the tank, although I'm quite short, so I've got quite a lot of room. If you're a bit taller, it might be a little bit more compact compared to the other two. And you do get quite a chunky dash. You get a USB connection. And the motor is really throaty and really powerful as well. It punches almost with the same sort of aggression as the 790 Adventure, which it is definitely not based on. But it's only when you put the Cove 800X with the 790 and the Ténéré where you sort of see where the money goes. So there is a huge disparity in price, when you spend a bit of time on the Cove, so I did a couple of hours just riding this just to get my head into it, and noticed that it's a little bit buzzier on the motorway at the exact same speed, slightly different revs. It's just get a little bit buzzier through the bars. The screen doesn't feel like it's been set up and developed in such a way that it negates the turbulence, so you do get a little bit more buffeting than you get for the other two. And I was wearing the same kit, same helmet, same everything on the same stretch of road just to make sure I was getting a good balance between them. The seat is definitely not the worst seat I've ever used. It's reasonably comfortable, but compared to the other two, it's quite a bit harder and it's quite thin as well. So for longer journeys, we were all fighting over the KTM and then the Ténéré. Last, but certainly not least, you've got the engine and the electronic setup. So the engine is really nice, it's really meaty, it's got loads of power, but it is brutal on and off the throttle. We've had this with quite a lot of like the newer brands lately where they just struggle to get that really crisp throttle connection that we've sort of come to expect, but we've come to expect it from brands that have been doing it for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and it's taken them that long to develop the connection and to be able to do that with existing emissions regulations. So considering this is a first stab, it is truly amazing to think about it, but it is incredibly aggressive. And it's not just on the throttle pickup as well initially, it's also on the engine braking strategy. As soon as you drop the throttle, it's almost like you're hitting a brick wall. It feels like you're on a race bike where you set the engine braking up to be as high as possible. And to be honest, it's a bit off-putting, especially when you're on the motorway. All you do is chop it a little bit and you lose so much speed. And another thing that's not been quite developed so well is the electronic rider aids. They are just nowhere near as refined as especially the KTM. And that is because they just haven't had the time to develop them. They haven't got the experience behind it. The ABS is a little bit intrusive and the traction control is really aggressive. And when it kicks in, it literally just shuts the throttle and almost wants to throw you off. And it does so at weird times. Now, a nice feature is you can turn it off and it does stay off if you set the settings up. But even then, when you're navigating the dash, it's just quite clumsy in the way things are worded and stuff like that. It just doesn't feel as refined. Saying that, it's nothing that would actually put me off buying it. At a time when everything is so tight, everything is so expensive, and looking at these bikes now, they are a luxury, no matter how much people may say or think their budget. This is still an amazing proposition for the money. For 8.5 grand, it is definitely a contender. If you're buying an adventure bike, some of you may never ever see a speck of dirt, but if you're buying one, it is quite nice just to explore a little bit, you know, take the road less travelled. And we did a little bit of that on these three. We're going to start with the Ténéré 700 Explore. Now that is the least off-road biased Ténéré, but as you can see, it's still got a 21-inch front wheel. It's still a Ténéré at heart. It's still got reasonably long travel suspension. It still performs well. Although it hasn't got the really nice setup from, say, the Ténéré 700 Extreme, that really lets it rail into corners, that you can really land jumps and hit bumps hard with, it still does a reasonable job of, you know, soaking up undulations. Unless you're going to do really heavy hardcore stuff, you won't miss that suspension travel too much. If you're going to do fire lane or gravel road, stuff like that, that is still a really good bit of kit. It's still got the switchable ABS that you can turn completely off. It's still got a really nice throttle connection that you can have a proper play around with the rear. And because it is a little bit lower, if you're a bit smaller and get into trouble, it's easier to manage too. The KTM is what a KTM should be off-road. That thing is absolutely gorgeous, and I'll keep on banging on about it. That low centre of gravity makes such a difference when you're doing really tight and technical stuff, when you're going between ruts. It just makes life a little bit easier. Although if you want to have something really hardcore and really premium, you go for the much more expensive 890 Adventure R, which is sort of in the realms with the Desert X and the Tiger 900 rallies and stuff like that. This thing is still a capable machine that can pretty much take on anything the Ténéré can. And to be honest, I'd say a little bit more. It's got off-road ABS, off-road traction control. It's got an optional rally mode, which we have on this model, which is really good because you can change the settings individually. So you can have a certain amount of slip in your traction control. You can change the throttle connection. It's something that you can sort of customize and make your own. It's just a really nice, confidence-inspiring chassis and setup off-road. the most off-roady of the bunch is probably the Cove. The suspension setup on it is really nice. It seems to tackle and handle pretty much anything we can throw its way. It's really light and agile. The seat height's quite low. It's a really fun and exciting thing, especially because you've got that really aggressive throttle. You sort of got to have your wits about you. What I'd say is this is better for someone who's a bit more experienced off-road. A, because of that really aggressive throttle, and B, it's actually a bit flighty on the front end. It's a little bit more excitable, shall we say, than the other two. And if you're looking to be a proper off-road hero, this will deliver for you. Now, if it was my money and if I could stretch that far, I personally would go for either the KTM or the Ténéré. The KTM I would go for because I'm a sucker for cruise control. It's the easiest to manage, and to be honest, it's just quite pleasant if you're riding it on-road or off-road as well because of that low centre of gravity. If you're a fan of the Ténéré's looks, that Ténéré appeal, that is the best Ténéré as a road bike. But if you can't stretch that far, if you want a proper middleweight adventure bike, the Cove 800X is proof that you don't have to break the bank for a brand new bike.